There's something about a woman who doesn't hand herself over completely. Something that lingers. That keeps a man staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m., not because she said something extraordinary, but because she didn't. Because there's still a door she hasn't opened. And his mind, whether he admits it or not, keeps walking toward it. This isn't a modern invention. Women who understood the quiet architecture of mystery have always moved through the world differently. Cleopatra didn't chase Mark Antony with declarations. She created a gravitational pull, through strategic absence, through the sense that you were never quite seeing all of her. The fascination wasn't in what she revealed. It was in the constant, maddening suggestion that there was more. That's a kind of power most people never talk about, because it doesn't look like power. It looks like stillness. Here's the contradiction that catches most women off guard. Men say they want honesty, openness, someone who doesn't play games. And they mean it. Partly. But what actually keeps them up at night isn't the woman who gave them everything on the first conversation. Behavioral psychology is remarkably blunt about this. The brain works harder for what it doesn't fully understand. It fixates, it circles back. The gap in information doesn't create frustration, it creates obsession. What a man already possesses rarely consumes him the way the unknown does. Think about Marilyn Monroe for a moment. She was everywhere, every screen, every magazine, every party. And yet no one ever felt like they really had her. There was always a layer just out of reach. You could read every interview and still walk away feeling like you'd only touched the surface. That distance wasn't accidental. It was a kind of self-possession so complete that it became its own magnetism. She wasn't chasing attention. Attention came to her, and it never quite felt satisfied. Plato wrote that love is fundamentally a desire for the incomplete, that we're pulled toward what feels unfinished, what still holds potential. Aristotle added something quieter, that perceived excellence lives not just in what's shown, but in what's intuited. Put those two ideas together in the context of modern relationships, and something clarifying happens. Mystery isn't a tactic, it's the space that makes a man invest. The gap that makes him return to the thought of you even when he's trying not to. Give everything away too soon, and there's nothing left to pursue. Maintain the intrigue, and you occupy a room in his mind he didn't know he'd rented out. But here's what mystery is not, and this matters. It's not coldness. It's not manufactured absence designed to punish or confuse. A woman who truly understands this doesn't disappear to create panic. She simply has a life. A real, full, genuinely interesting life that doesn't pause and wait for him to validate it. Her happiness isn't contingent on his attention. And that, more than anything, is what makes her impossible to forget. When he realizes that her joy doesn't hinge on his next message, something shifts in him. Quietly. Almost involuntarily. He starts to wonder. He starts to care. And then, without quite knowing why, he starts to return. Now here's something worth sitting with. You've probably noticed that a man's behavior and his actual feelings are often speaking two completely different languages. The messages that take hours to arrive, the casual tone that doesn't match the fact that he keeps showing up. The half-distracted conversation where his eyes still track every person you talk to across the room. On the surface, it all reads as indifference, and if you take it at face value, it can feel like rejection. But watch the pattern, not the moment, because patterns don't lie the way posture does. Men are wired, evolutionarily, psychologically, for pursuit. Not in some crude, outdated sense, but in the deeper sense that effort and challenge activate something in them that easy availability simply doesn't. When a man appears aloof, he is often not pulling away. He's measuring. He's gauging the emotional temperature. He's testing, maybe not consciously, whether you'll chase or whether you'll simply continue being someone worth chasing. Schopenhauer observed that scarcity intensifies value, and that emotional effort is often a direct reflection of perceived worth. In plain terms, he invests more when he senses there's something genuinely valuable to invest in. The confusion happens when women interpret distance as disinterest and respond by doing more. More texts, more availability, more proof of worthiness, and it tends to backfire, not because the men are cruel, but because it inadvertently removes the very tension that was holding his attention. Predictability soothes. but it doesn't captivate. The women who figured this out, and you may know some of them without realizing it, aren't playing games. They're simply not abandoning themselves in response to someone else's ambivalence. They maintain their rhythm, their friendships, their work, their passions. They respond thoughtfully rather than reflexively. And the men who initially seemed uninterested start initiating, start showing up differently, start revealing small, fleeting moments of vulnerability that they'd never show to someone who was already waiting at the door. Nietzsche wrote about the nature of desire and resistance, that true attraction doesn't live in possession, but in the tension between seeking and withholding. The man who pretends not to care is often responding to a woman who has presented him with exactly that tension. Not through performance, through the simple, quiet fact that she has a self she isn't willing to dissolve for anyone, perceived value. It sounds like a cold, transactional phrase, but the reality of it is surprisingly warm. It's not about being better than someone or constructing an image. It's about the quiet signal you send when you live as though your time, attention, and presence genuinely mean something. Eleanor Roosevelt didn't command rooms by demanding respect. She lived with conviction. She made decisions. She communicated strength through the consistency of her choices, not through declarations about her worth. That kind of presence doesn't need to announce itself. It's felt. There's a particular habit many women fall into, not out of weakness, but out of genuine care, of making themselves more available to signal affection. Responding immediately, rearranging plans, asking less of themselves to give more to him. And it comes from a good place, but the psychological effect is always the opposite of what's intended. Men are instinctively more drawn to what requires a degree of effort, not because they want to struggle, but because effort signals that the reward is real. When attention feels scarce, not artificially, but because her life is genuinely full, it becomes valuable. When it feels freely given without condition, it paradoxically becomes easier to overlook. Kant talked about the inherent dignity of the individual, the idea that self-respect isn't a mood or a strategy, it's a foundation. A woman who respects herself doesn't need to perform worth. She embodies it through the way she spends her time, the boundaries she holds without drama, the life she continues to build regardless of who's watching. Men sense this. Not always consciously, but it registers. And it creates a very specific kind of attraction. One that doesn't evaporate after the initial excitement, because it isn't based on performance. It's based on something real. The practical side of this isn't complicated, though it does require a kind of ongoing self-honesty. It means actually investing in your passions rather than just referencing them, maintaining friendships that have nothing to do with him, making decisions about your time based on what you genuinely want, not on what you think will impress. These aren't strategic moves dressed up as authenticity. They are authenticity. And the effect they produce. A man who initiates more, who invests more, who thinks about you in the spaces between conversations, is the natural consequence of a woman who has refused to put her life on hold. Communication, in the context of attraction, is almost never really about the words. It's about the pause before you answer, the text you didn't send at midnight, the way you smiled briefly and then moved on, the call you returned the next morning because you were genuinely busy, not because you were performing unavailability, but because your evening didn't revolve around waiting. These micro moments carry more information than most people realize. They form a picture. And the picture he's building of you is made almost entirely of things you never explicitly said. Neuroscience has a term for the mechanism underneath this: intermittent reinforcement. When responses come unpredictably, not coldly or erratically, but simply according to the natural rhythm of a life that's actually being lived, the brain treats each interaction as meaningful. Anticipation builds, attention sharpens. It's the same reason a song you hear occasionally stays with you longer than one you overplay. Scarcity, even unintentional scarcity, creates weight. This is also true in person. The way you carry yourself in a room, whether your attention is easily distributed or thoughtfully given. A composed posture, a genuine but not excessive laugh, the kind of eye contact that's warm but doesn't beg for anything. All of this communicates something before you've said a word. He reads it. Most men won't articulate what they're responding to, but they feel the difference between a woman who is quietly self-possessed and one who is working to secure approval. The first draws him in. The second creates a low-grade discomfort he can't always name. Lao Tzu wrote, and it's one of those lines that sounds simple until you actually sit with it. Nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished. There's something in that which applies here with unexpected precision. Visible effort, in the context of attraction, is often misread. Not always, but often. The woman who moves through interaction with patience, with timing, with the quiet confidence that she doesn't need to force anything. She communicates influence without ever reaching for it. So let's bring it to the place this was always heading. He will come back. Not because you orchestrated it, not because you played the right moves at the right time, but because, when a woman stops chasing the space where someone should be and starts genuinely occupying her own life, fully, unapologetically, without waiting for permission, she becomes someone impossible to mentally file away. Most women have been told, in various ways, that the solution to a man pulling back is to reach further forward. More contact, more warmth, more proof that you care. And every time it doesn't work, there's this quiet, devastating conclusion that maybe the caring wasn't enough. But the caring was never the problem. The direction of it was. Because attention that flows outward, toward him, before it flows inward, toward you, signals something he registers even if he can't name it. That your stability depends on his response, and that unconsciously removes the very thing that made you compelling. Studies on attachment and desire are consistent on this point. Autonomous individuals, people with genuine internal security, clear boundaries, and lives they're actually invested in, create stronger relational bonds, not because they're withholding love, but because their love doesn't read as desperation. And desperation, however dressed up, breaks the tension that attraction requires. The woman who has absorbed all of this doesn't perform distance. She doesn't strategically ignore messages or manufacture scenarios to seem busy. She is, simply, busy. Engaged with her own becoming. Unwilling to shrink for someone who is still deciding whether to show up fully. And in that unwillingness, quiet, dignified, without drama, she becomes the gravitational center of his attention. He may test it, pull back to see if you'll run toward him, go quieter to see if you'll fill the silence. And when you don't, when you remain stable, warm but unshaken, present in your own life, something in him recalibrates. The pursuit shifts from something he was resisting to something he's choosing. That's the only kind of return worth having. This is not a game. It never was. Games require deception. What this requires is something far harder and far more valuable. Knowing yourself well enough that you don't disappear for someone who hasn't yet decided to stay. Mystery, perceived value, invisible communication, emotional regulation, these aren't separate tools. They're facets of the same thing. A woman who has genuinely come home to herself. And from that place, you don't chase anyone. You don't have to, because the gravity does what gravity does. He thinks of you, he reaches for his phone, he finds reasons to return. Not because you made him, because he couldn't help it.